Daf Ein Ches Amud Beis, the Mishnah towards the top of the Amud. Zok the Mishnah, Nitme Basar v'Chelev Kaim. If the meat of the Korban Pesach became Tom, but the Chelev is torn, Ein Zerek es Adam. You cannot continue with the avodah. You can't be Zerek the Dam on the Mizbech because the Korban Pesach has to be eaten. And if the meat of the Korban Pesach can't be eaten, you can't be Zerek the Dam. Nitma chelev balser kayim, but if it's the chelev became was tomei and the balser is kayim and the balser is tor, so the balser could be eaten, then zerek is a dam. Then you can continue with the avodah. You can be zerek the dam. The korban is kosher because there is meat that can be eaten. The pasuk by the Korban Pesach says, "Ishul fi achla tachois v'alaseh." Achila is an essential part of the Korban Pesach. And if the balser is Tomei, you can't continue. But if the Chelev is Tomei, the balser is Tor, you can. So then Zorek is a Dam. Then you can be Zorek is a Dam. Rashi says, and this is even according to Yeshua, because as long as part of the Oyach Lamar are intact, either the Chilas Mizbeach or the Chilas Adam, you can do the Avodah. Even though Yeshua says, Imein Balser Ein Dam, but here, the one part of it would suffice. You don't need both of them. So therefore, if the balser is kaim, you can be a zerek at the dam. Rav Kiva points out, it's davka according to Rav Yeshua, not even according to Yeshua, because it's mashma that if they would both be tomei, that you could be zerek at the dam. That's according to Rav Yeshua, not according to Rav Elazar. Al koponim, that's it by the Korban Pesach. Ubim Gedoshim by other korbanos einu kain ela afal pishin nitma balser v'chelev kaim zerek es adam. By the Mugdoshim, it's not that way. That he says that even though it's nitma basar chelev kaim, you could be zerek the dam because the basar is not an essential part of the korban. Now, even though the Mishnah says that ein zerek es adam, but Rav is learning over here what the Mishnah means is only l'chadchila. But b'di'evet, that if he did, the korban is not possible. It's not a possible korban. It's only lechatchila. This din is only lechatchila. Fraktik moravabin and achila. So the korban pesach has to be eaten, and if it's tomei, it can't be eaten. So therefore, how can it be a kosher korban? The Gemara answers achila ma'akev. The achila is not ma'akev. It is not ma'akev whether, even though he can't be mekayim the mitzvah of achila, though it's a mitzvah. If he can't, it's not ma'akev, and the korban is still kosher. It says, I ish lefi ochla, and ish lefi ochla tachois alaseh, and according to what he eats, meaning it's mashma that eating is essential. What answers? That's the mitzvah. It's not ma'akev, it's only the mitzvah. Ula akev loi. It's not ma'akev v'atanya. We learn in the Brisa b'michsas. It says according to the number of the people that you shech the korban pesach according to the number of people. That's in the chaburim. Elamid shein pesach nishchat ela menuyav. The korban is shechted only for those who are registered in the chabur, who are part of the chabur. You might think if he shech shalei menuyav, yeah, kavral mitzvah kosher. It's just that he was ayron a mitzvah. He wasn't mekayim the mitzvah, but the korban should still be kosher. Talmud loymar ish lefi achla tachoisu. Ish lefi achla tachoisu. It says according to the person you count. The pasuk repeats it. Akasa shana lav la'akev. The Torah repeats it to tell you that's ma'akev. That's a klal and kachim where the Torah repeats it. It's ma'akev. Ve'iskish, so this din is mentioned by Menuyev. Ve'iskish oichlam l'menuyin, and there's a hakish between eating it to those who are eating, to eating, and to the ones who are registered. So to teach you, so just like that shalem l'menuyev is ma'akev, then also it teaches you that shalei loichlav is also ma'akev, and therefore it has to be shechted for people who can eat it. Ella Rav Tomar Kervnosa. Where it says in Echanami, the Tana of this Brisa, Rav was not going according to the Tana of this Brisa. And according to this Brisa, in Echanami, it would be possible. But Rav is going according to Rav Nosson, Domar Achilas Pesachim loy ma'akve. He holds that the Achilas Pesachim is a mitzvah, and it's not ma'akiv. And therefore, according to him, he said that b'di'evet would be kosher. The way the Rishonim speak out, Taisus and other Rishonim, Taisus Rosh speak out, it's not to say we don't hold this, the Rabbanan, the Mandomer that we just had that says that it's ma'akiv. It doesn't mean that the actual achila is ma'akiv. The achila of the meat of the Korban Pesach is a mitzvah, but the avodah has to be done with the potential, with the ability that the Korban Pesach can be eaten, that the basar can be eaten. And if not, the avodah is psula. Rabbi Nosson holds that that's not ma'akiv. It's not ma'akiv that the avodah has to be done with for the ability that the meat has to be eaten. As we'll see shortly, it doesn't mean that Eichlam is not a factor. As we'll see, the Gemara explains, as we'll see shortly, that it has to be that the people that it's shechted for have the potential, that they themselves could have the potential to eat. But it doesn't have to, the avodah doesn't have to be done with the potential for the meat to be eaten. So that's the machlekes, and therefore Rav was going according to Rav Nosson, and he said, and therefore Atana holds that b'di'evid, even though the meat is tomei, even though b'di'evid, if the avodah was done, then it's still kosher. So I Rav Nosson, where do we see that Rav Nosson holds this way? Ilay mahar Rav Nosson, we learned this in Real B'Vaisa. Rav Nosson Aimer says, Min nine shekol Yisrael yitzim Pesach echad. How do you know that God's call Yisrael can be with one Korban Pesach? One Korban can be brought from all of them. Tamaloimer, the pasuk says, V'shachtu Vaisa kol kahal adas Yisrael ben Arabayim. They all shech the Korban Pesach ben Arabayim in the afternoon. I v'chi kol hakal sheichtem. Do they all shech it? They don't all shech the korban of Halloween shech and el echad. One person shechs it. Elam elamed shekol Yisrael yotzim b'Pesach echad. This teaches you that Kol Yisrael could be yotzim with one korban Pesach. Now, there's not enough meat in one korban for everybody to eat, so you see that the ability to eat is not market. Gemara says no. There's no right from there. Dilma shiny halsam the im mimashche hane chazilahani im mimashche hane chazilahani. It's not a right from there because there is a potential, because each one could withdraw and another group can join. Meaning, it is not, even though you're Memana and the Korban Pesach, and there's not enough, certainly not enough to go around for everybody, but the potential is that some will withdraw and some will now join, and some will remain, some will withdraw and other ones will join. So there is a potential that any one person could be the one that's part of the chabur that's eating the Korban Pesach. So there is a potential for any one person to eat from the Korban, so therefore it's considered lo yichlov. Ella, let's bring the right from the following Elha Rabbi Nosson. The Sanya within the Bryson, Nimna Lav Chabur Achas. If they had one group, people joined one group of the Korban Pesach, and there was only enough meat to have a kazayas for all of these people. There was no more than a kazayas for each and every one of the people that joined the Chabur. There were so many people that there was not more than a kazayas basar for each one. And then another group joined, so obviously there's no more meat for the second group, and they're not going to be able to eat. So Rishonim Sheyesh Lam Kazayas, the first group that has a kazayas of meat, they eat from the Korban Pesach, they're part from Pesach Sheni. Achreinim Sheyesh Lam Kazayas, but the second group that don't have kazayas of meat, they're ein oichlin v'chayavim v'lasos Pesach Sheni. They don't eat any meat, and they're potter from doing Pesach Sheni. So they don't eat any meat. Well, there's no meat to eat. Rav Chaim says it's actually also for them to eat because they're considered shaloi l'menuya, because since there is no meat for them to eat, it's considered like they're not part of the chabur. Rabbi Nosson, but Rabbi Nosson Imri says no. Elavela petur melasas Pesach Sheni shekvar nizrach hadam. He says they're both part from Pesach Sheni because it was nizrach hadam and they were part of the chabura and they had a zrikas hadam. So l'char you see from here that the achila is not ma'akev. Where it says no, it's not a right. Still akati dilma shani halsam di mimashka hane chazalhu. Maybe it's still not a right because the potential still exists, because if the first group withdrew, then they would have enough meat. Or if some of the first group withdrew, they would have meat to eat. So the Gemara says, no, im kain listen hoil ruim lemashech. then if that's the case, then it should state that reason, that it's possible that since the first ones are able to withdraw, then the second ones would be able to have meat. But my shekvar nizrak adam, but it doesn't say that. It says shekvar nizrak adam, that the zrik has already been done. So shema mina bedam tloya milsa. So you see from here that it's totally on the zrikas adam. Aval achila loy ma'akiv, but achila is not ma'akiv, and therefore, since the zrika was done, and there he was part of the chabura, the zrika was done, even though there's no possibility of eating the meat, the zrika was done, he was part of the chabura, so he's eitzah. So you see that Rabbi Nosson holds that achila le'ma'akev. Break the Gemara Maduchi, the Rav the Michael Masechet lachatchila. Rabbi Nosson was forcing Rav to say what the Mishnah says, that when we say that you don't do the avodah, the Pesach can't be done, it means only lechatchila. And we're going according to Rav Nosson. Why don't we say bepashtus nek mikirabon v'afilo de'even nami loy? Why should we say it's going daf according to Rav Nosson? Let us say it's going according to Rabbanan, and even b'di'even it's possible. More answers Rav Mas Nisan Kashisa, because he had a kash from the Mishnah. Amai Tani Ein Zarek as Adam. Why does the Mishnah say don't do the Zrik as Adam? Don't be Zarek Adam. Listen, possible. I should say it's possible. Elishma Mina Ein Zarek L'Chachila. Aval Di'evet Shapir Dami. So it's meduik from the Mishnah that it's only a din L'Chachila you shouldn't do it. But b'di'evet it'll be kosher like Rav Nosson. According to Rav Nosson, it says the chila is not makif. The pasuk says ish l'fiach. So why does the Torah say that? More answers the be'inan gavda chazil achila. What it means to say is that the person who's bringing the Korban Pesach, the person has to be roy la'achila. The person has to be roy la'achila. But the basar, it's not referring to the basar. The person has to be roy la'achila. So if it's a person who's sick, if it's a person who's unable to eat, then you're not yaitzu with that Korban Pesach. That's what it's referring to. It has to be a person who's able to eat, and as Taisa says, and we learn out Shalei L'Menuyev for Shalei L'Eichlav, and it's ma'akiv. Who's the Tana for what we learned in the Bryce? If you shech the Korban Pesach for people who are able to eat it, but he did the Zrika for those who aren't able to eat it. The Pesach is kosher for Adam Yaitze by Yedei Chavasa, and your Yaitze, your Chiyav of Korban Pesach with it. So Kiman, let us say Rabbi Nosson he v'loy Rabbanan. Let us say it's only Rav Nosson and not Rabbanan, because according to the Rabbanan, the Achila is Ma'akev. Or it says, no, Afilo Tem Rabbanan, Ein Machshav Zo'eichem B'Zrika. The Zrika, the Machshava for Zrika is not Nageya. What we say is that it has to be for people, again, like we learned before, like Taisa said, it doesn't mean that you actually have to eat the Korban Pesach according to Rabbanan. But the Avodah has to be done for people who can eat the Korban Pesach, who are able to eat the Korban Pesach, and it has to be done for Korban Pesach that can be eaten. So what we mean to say is that it has to be done, the avodah has to be done, the ikra, what's kaveh, the avodah is the shlit, not the zrik, meaning the shlit has to be done for people and for a Korban Pesach that can be eaten. And the shchita has to be done for it, and that the zrika should be done also for people who are able to eat it. But a machshava at the time of zrika is not nageya. The machshava at the time of the zrika itself is not nageya. It's a machshava at shchita that is kaveh. Ish lefi acha tachaisu shchita tachaisu l'aseh. Mantan alad tan rabbanon haresha yachayla b'shal shchita v'chala b'shal zrika. If a person was a chayla at the time of the shchita, but he couldn't eat the Korban Pesach, but he was healthy, he was chala b'shal at the time of the zrika, or chala b'shal shchita, or opposite, he was healthy at the time of shchita v'chala b'shal zrika. Ein shechtin v'zarkin alav. You can't shech the Korban Pesach for him. Ad sheyeh chala b'shal shchita ad shal zrika. He has to be healthy on both times he has to be healthy, the time of the shchita, time of the zrika. Kiman, who's this going according to? Neima Rabbanan he v'loy Rabbi Nosson. Let's say it's the Rabbanan and not Rabbi Nosson, because we know Rabbi Nosson is mekel, and he's mekel, and he says that the meat doesn't have to be eaten at all. So therefore, let us say that he similarly should be mekel, and we don't need the person to be healthy at the time of both shchita and zrika. Now we know the Rabbanan are makmer, so let's say this is dafka according to the Rabbanan. The Gemara says no. Afilu tem Rabbi Nosson. It could be according to Rabbi Nosson. Gaver the chazel achil be'ina. He holds, even though that he holds that the meat doesn't have to be eaten, but the gaver, the person, it has to be a person that is able to eat the meat, and that's negeya even for the zrika stage. Who's the Tana that we learned? And then the Baalim became Tomei. The blood should be thrown in a state of Tara. You need a clear store. You do the Zrikas Adam Batara, but the meat should not be in Batuma. So we see that you can do the Zrika even though the basar cannot be eaten. Kiman Rabbi Elazar b'machloekes shnuya Rabbi Nosson. He says it's machlokes shnuya and it's Rabbi Nosson, and it's going to, according to Rabbi Nosson, who holds that you don't need the Baalim to be Torah at the time of the Zrika. So this is not like we just learned previously, and he's holding, Rabbi Elazar says that it's very according to Rabbi Nosson, and not like we said previously that Rabbi Nosson requires him to be Torah at the time of Zrika. And he says, and Chanami, he's mekel, Rabbi Nosson is mekel, and you don't require him to be Torah at the time of the Zrika. Rabbi Yochanan, he says, I feel the Tema Rabbanan, he says it even could be going according to the Rabbanan. The reason why we say that it can be done is because B'tzibur. It's talking about a tzibur, and therefore it's brought, the korban is brought even in the state of tumah. The afil b'tumah nami avdi. They even do it in the state of tumah. So, well, if it's brought b'tzibur, then it's even eaten. And here it says it's not eaten. So, we can't be talking about it that it's talking about b'tzibur. More says no. It could be eaten. However, it's a gzera that we're afraid that maybe the Baalim will become Tameh after Zrika. And the people say, the people will say, last year we were Tameh and we ate the Korban Pesach. And they'll assume, therefore, this year we can also eat the Korban Pesach, even though the Tumah took place after the Zrika. Now, they won't realize the previous year, where the Baalim became Tomei for the Zrika, they were Tomei at the time of the Zrika. And therefore, since at the time of the Zrika was a Tomei, therefore it was brought, the korban was bought B'tumah, and therefore can be eaten B'tumah. But this year, where they're Torah at the time of the Zrika. So therefore, the din of Tumah, it's not considered the Tumah that's bought B'tzibur. And therefore, you can't eat it. And therefore, because of that Zera, they said their balsa should not be eaten. But that's what Rav Yochanan answers. We can be talking even according to the Rabbanan, the korban is kosher because it's a Tumah B'tzibur. By same, I'll tell you alternative another teretz. Rav Damar Karishua. Now, going back on to what we said with the beginning, that we started at the beginning that Rav said that the Mishnah, that he says that it's only an Isra L'Chadchila. To bring the Korban Pesach is only an Isra L'Chadchila, even though the balsa is Tomei. But the evidence kosher, so one approach was that Rav said he's going according to Rabbi Nosson. By same, I'll tell you another approach. Rav Damar Rav Yeshua. He holds like Rav Yeshua. That's how you will learn in the Brisa of Rav Yeshua. He says, "Kol azvachim shebetayra," all of the zvachim in the Torah, ben shenitman basar v'chelav kayim, whether the meat is tummy and the chelav is tor, ben shenitman chelav basar kayim, the sarek es adam. You can do the avodah, you can do the zrika. However, an exception is Noser, whereas the Pesach, the Korban Noser and the Pesach, Nitma Chelev or Basar Kaim. If the Chelev is Tomei, but the Basar is Tor, Zorek is Adam, then yes, you can continue. But Nitma Basar v'Chelev Kaim, but if it's the Basar that became Tomei, even though the Chelev is Kaim, since by the Korban Pesach, the Achil is essential part of the Avodah, and by the Noser, you need the Basar. Because with the Basar is also part of the Avodah, they did the Tenufa, they had the Zroya B'Shel, and they burnt the hair of the Nazir under the pot, and they did the Tenufa. It's an essential part of the Avodah. Therefore, over there we say, Nitma Basar v'Chelev Kaim Ein Zorak Zadam. You don't do this V'im Zorak, but if they did, b'diavad is kosher. But nitmu habalim b'meis. But if the balim became tamah, the tumas meis, so now they're tamah for 7 days. So the balim legabe the korban pesach, he won't be able to eat the korban pesach. Legabe the nazir, it says in the zeros and nullifies in the zeros. Lo yizrak, you cannot do the zrigas adam. B'imzorak lo yhurtza. But if you did lo yhurtza, because since the balim is they're unable to eat from the Korban Pesach, they're unable to eat from the basar, and therefore it's b'diavad. Even b'diavad is basar. They don't have to actually eat from it, but they have to be able to eat from it. So therefore, if it's the we say that if it's nitva is our nitma chelav a basar kara basar kayim, we said zorak adam. And we say that if it's nitma basar v'chelav kayim ein zorak adam v'im zorak hurtza. But that's only if it's the basar. So we see that, but it's the basar achila is not maki. Nevertheless, lechatchila, it can't be done. B'diavad is kosher. But if it's nitma bailim, if it's the bailim where they're unable to partake in the basar, then even b'diavad, then b'diavad is also possible loy hurtza. So it goes with the shita, this shita of Rabbi Yeshua.